She was left to die. One young officer, broken and bleeding, trapped beneath a mountain of ice and silence on a Wyoming road. No sirens, no rescue, just the cold and the dark, closing in. But fate sent someone, a widowed sheriff and a German shepherd haunted by loss, both searching for purpose in a world frozen by grief. Together, they faced a storm fiercer than war and secrets colder than snow. What happened next will make you cry and believe in miracles again. Before we begin, tell me, where are you watching from? Drop your country in the comments. I want to see how far this story travels. And if you believe in second chances, if you believe animals deserve love, not pain, hit that subscribe button, because what you're about to hear will stay with you forever. The winter sun had not yet risen over Pine Lake, Wyoming, and already the world was a study in relentless white. Snowdrifts as high as a man's waist lined the edges of the winding county roads, and every pine bough sagged under the weight of last night's storm. The wind was still a living thing here, clawing at window panes, whistling through the thin seams of Jack Turner's old Ford Bronco as he navigated the back roads with the silent caution of a hunter. Jack Turner was a man who carried his years quietly. 42, tall and lean, he bore the posture of someone who had spent a lifetime carrying burdens no one else wanted: grief, duty, and the loneliness that comes with outliving those you love. His hair was a dark chestnut shot through with early gray, his face wind-burned and furrowed, his eyes a stormy blue-gray that seemed to see both the present and the past at once. Jack had been sheriff of Pine Lake for just under a decade, but even in this short time the people of town had learned to trust his calm voice and steady hands. There was gentleness in him, but it was always armored in resolve, a kind of quiet bravery that seemed born from sorrow. Seated beside him, sitting with unusual poise for a passenger, was Thor. Thor was an 8-year-old German shepherd, broad-shouldered, heavy-boned, with a thick pelt of black and tan fur and soulful amber eyes. There was a ragged scar beneath his left ear, a thin white crescent that caught the light when he turned his head, and his muzzle had begun to gray. Thor's left ear always drooped a little, a legacy from some injury Jack had never pressed him about. If you looked closely, you could see that the dog's ribs showed faintly under his fur, a legacy of hard months before he'd found Jack. Jack hadn't meant to keep a dog, especially after Melissa passed, but Thor had found him just before the first winter after her death, skinny, limping, and haunted. It was Lucas, Jack's 8-year-old son, who had insisted on the name. "He's strong, Dad," Lucas had declared, the way only a child could. "He's like Thor. He needs a hero's name. Maybe that'll make him brave again." And so Thor he became, as if the very act of naming could give the animal new strength. It was the first time Jack had seen Lucas smile since Melissa's funeral, and the dog had seemed to understand, resting his great shaggy head in the boy's lap as if he'd found safe harbor at last. Jack glanced over at Thor now, as they rolled through the brittle hush of morning. The snow muffled all sound, but Thor was alert, nose twitching at scents Jack couldn't detect, ears swiveling beneath the battered brim of Jack's old hat. In town, most homes were still dark, but a thin curl of smoke rose from the Turner house at the edge of the woods. Inside, Lucas Turner sat cross-legged at the kitchen table, a half-eaten bowl of oatmeal cooling in front of him. He was a wiry boy, fair-skinned, with a shock of sandy hair that always seemed too wild to tame, and a smile that could transform his narrow, serious face into something mischievous. Today, he was home alone for the first time. Jack's shift had started early, and Mrs. Harper, the usual babysitter, was snowed in on the other side of town. Lucas's brown eyes darted between the clock and his father's list of rules taped to the fridge. He'd already called Jack to report that he'd remembered to lock the back door, to feed the chickens, to take out the trash. He wanted so much to be brave, to help fill the quiet spaces his mother had left behind. The phone rang, startling him from his thoughts, a call from Pine Lake Elementary, his school. The nurse's voice, strained but polite, informed Lucas that due to the storm, several boxes of medical supplies meant for the school clinic had not arrived. She wondered if Sheriff Turner could check at the depot if he was out on patrol. Lucas scribbled a note for his father, determined not to forget. Back on County Road 17, Jack slowed as he approached Old Timber Bridge, a narrow, sagging structure that crossed the frozen creek at the edge of town. The snow here was deeper, drifted high against the wooden guardrails. Thor shifted in the seat, suddenly alert, hackles rising. Without warning, the dog began to whine, a low, anxious sound, barely audible over the wind. Then, in a burst of motion, Thor lunged forward, pressing his nose against the windshield, pawing at the door. "Easy, buddy," Jack murmured. But Thor's eyes were locked on something beyond the bridge, something hidden by a bank of wind-blown snow. Jack parked the Bronco at the shoulder, pulling on his gloves and sheriff's parka. As soon as the door opened, Thor leapt out and plunged into the snow, following some invisible thread. Jack followed, boots crunching through the icy crust. For a moment, all was silent but for the soft hiss of snow falling from the trees. Then Jack saw it, a dark shape half buried in a snowdrift. The front end of a patrol car, glass shattered, hood crumpled. A vehicle's rear tire spun uselessly in the air. The engine was silent, the only color the smear of red against white. Jack's heart hammered. "Thor, heel!" he barked, but the dog was already there, digging frantically at the snow, whining with urgency. Jack rushed forward and wiped away the glass. Inside the upturned car was a woman, her hair blonde and blood-soaked, her uniform dark with melted snow and blood. Her face was pale, mouth slack, eyes closed. It was Evelyn Brooks, the new deputy. She had only been in Pine Lake for 3 weeks, transferred from Cheyenne after an officer-involved shooting left her reputation and her heart battered. Evelyn was tall, slender, with a sharp jawline and piercing green eyes, though now those eyes were shut tight. In town, people whispered that she was too young for such scars, that she spoke little, her smile always hesitant, as if she expected the world to break beneath her feet. Jack checked her pulse weak but present. He saw the seatbelt twisted tight across her chest, a gash on her forehead, and one arm at an odd angle. Thor nosed at her gently, whimpering, licking her frozen hand. For a moment, Jack thought he saw recognition flicker across Evelyn's features, a tremor in her lips, a faint flutter of her eyelids. He braced his shoulder against the door, wrenching it open with a screech of torn metal. Snow gusted in, swirling around the woman like a shroud. Jack unbuckled her, careful not to jostle her neck, and with Thor's help, eased her out onto the snow. She weighed almost nothing. She felt like someone who had lost more than blood. As Jack lifted her, Thor pressed close, his breath fogging in the cold air, his gaze never leaving Evelyn's face. There was something desperate in his posture, a longing that Jack had seen only once before, the day Lucas gave him his name, and Thor realized he was finally safe. "Come on, Thor. Let's bring her home," Jack said quietly. The dog barked once, a deep, resolute sound, and then turned, breaking a path through the drifts back to the truck. They moved quickly. Jack settled Evelyn gently in the back seat, wrapping her in the emergency blanket he always carried. Thor climbed in beside her, his big body curved protectively around her legs. In the front, Jack radioed for backup, knowing full well it would be hours before the snowplows could clear the road. The journey home was tense and silent. Jack glanced in the mirror and saw Thor licking Evelyn's hand, whining softly each time her breath faltered. The dog's eyes, gold and sorrowful, seemed to plead with the world to give this woman another chance. By the time Jack pulled into the driveway, the sky was brightening behind the clouds, casting everything in a ghostly blue. Lucas met him at the door, eyes wide with worry, clutching his notebook of chores and the message from the school. Jack handed his son a reassuring pat, then, with Thor's help, carried Evelyn inside, laying her by the fire. Lucas fetched blankets and towels, determined to be useful. For a while, the house was filled with the quiet chaos of crisis, Jack tending wounds, Lucas fetching water, Thor watching over Evelyn as if he'd known her all his life. No one spoke about the miracle of it all, that on a morning when the world seemed determined to stay frozen, a boy, a dog, and a grieving man had managed to thaw something precious. Outside, the snow kept falling, erasing the old tracks and promising, maybe, a new beginning. Jack Turner's house, a sturdy cabin built of old pine and hand-me-down hope, sat hunched against the wind at the forest's edge. By the time Jack and Thor carried Evelyn inside, the morning was a pale shimmer behind the swirling snow. Lucas, small and wiry, hovered at the edge of the living room, his eyes darting between his father and the wounded stranger on the couch. Thor paced restlessly, his thick black and tan fur bristling as he sniffed the air around Evelyn, almost as if the dog remembered something Jack could not. The living room was full of winter's hush, the tick of the clock, the snap of the fireplace, and the soft, uneven breaths of Evelyn Brooks. She lay draped in old quilts, face drained of color, blonde hair dark with blood and melting snow, her badge still pinned stubbornly to her torn uniform. She was tall, but now seemed shrunken, as if loss and pain had hollowed her out from the inside. Jack examined her arm, which had started to swell at the elbow, and cleaned the gash at her hairline with gentle hands. Lucas watched from a distance, determined to be brave, clutching his notebook of chores and the note about the school's missing medical supplies. Jack worked with quiet, methodical care. He had not always been this gentle. Once, grief had made him brittle, but time and responsibility had carved softer places in his heart. "She'll need a doctor," Jack muttered, glancing at Thor, who had not left Evelyn's side. The dog's eyes were fixed on her, a deep, watchful gold. Thor let out a low, almost musical whine and licked Evelyn's hand. The woman's eyelids fluttered but did not open. Jack pressed a cup of hot tea to her lips, urging her to swallow a few sips. Thor nudged her with his great head, unwilling to let her slip away. Jack frowned, feeling a twinge of confusion. Thor was not a dog given to instant trust, least of all with strangers. Lucas moved closer, sliding a blanket higher over Evelyn's chest. "Dad, is she going to be okay?" Jack answered quietly. "She will, if we do everything right." The words rang with hope he wasn't sure he believed. Just as Jack started to check Evelyn's breathing again, the phone rang. A sharp, unwelcome sound that jarred the stillness. Jack grabbed the receiver, one hand never leaving Evelyn's pulse. "Turner Residence," he answered, voice rough from worry. "Jack, it's Dylan." "You up yet?" The familiar voice belonged to Dylan Ward, Jack's closest friend and the owner of Pine Lake's only garage. Dylan was in his early 50s, thick-set and bearded, with a quick wit and hands stained by years of grease and honest work. He was the kind of man who made everyone feel a little safer just by walking into a room. "You wouldn't believe the morning I'm having," Jack replied. "One of your famous car rescues?" Dylan laughed, a gruff, warm sound. "Not today, buddy. But listen, we got a problem." "You hear about the missing medical supplies from the school?" Jack felt Lucas tense beside him. Lucas got a call from the nurse. "What's going on?" "It's not just the school," Dylan said, his tone darkening. "A bunch of deliveries for the clinic and the old folks' home gone. Vanished from the depot last night and nobody saw a thing. Ed at the post office said the locks were fine, nothing broken, but it's all missing." Jack's frown deepened. "You think it's someone local?" "I don't know," Dylan replied, worry heavy in his voice. "Could be some folks are getting desperate with the storm coming. I called you because I figured you'd want to know. You need help. You call me." Jack promised he would, then hung up, the sense of unease sharpening. Evelyn moaned softly, her eyes finally flickering open. Her gaze darted around the room, panicked, then settled on Thor. For a long moment she just stared at the dog, confusion and recognition warring in her green eyes. "Easy," Jack said softly, holding up his hands. "You're safe. You crashed on County 17. I'm Jack Turner, sheriff here." Evelyn tried to sit up but winced, clutching her arm. "How long?" "Not long," Jack reassured her. "But you need to rest. The doctor can't get here until the road's clear." He studied her face, saw the fear buried beneath her exhaustion. "Do you remember what happened?" Evelyn swallowed hard, her voice thin. "I was heading to the depot. There was a call about the school's medical shipment, something about the records not matching. I thought I saw someone at the edge of the woods, then—" She trailed off, pain making her shudder. Thor pressed closer, whining gently. Evelyn blinked at him, and Jack noticed the way her hand found his ruff automatically, as if the gesture was muscle memory. Jack felt the old prickling at the back of his neck, the feeling he always got when the world shifted under his feet. "You know this dog?" Jack asked quietly. Evelyn's gaze turned inward, her expression complicated. "He looks just like—" "Never mind. Maybe it's just the painkillers." But Jack saw something in her eyes, a sadness that didn't come from the crash. Thor remained at her side, refusing to leave, and Jack could not shake the suspicion that something deeper tied these two together. As the wind rattled the windows, Lucas fetched more blankets and heated soup. He told Evelyn about the school's missing supplies, his voice earnest. She listened, offering a weak smile, and promised to help when she could. The boy watched her with the solemn admiration reserved for those who return from the edge of danger. Outside, the blizzard roared, and the world shrank to the circle of firelight. Dylan, meanwhile, bundled into his old parka, tramped through town to check on his neighbors in the depot. He was a solid figure, broad-shouldered, with a battered wool cap pulled low over unruly salt and pepper hair. Dylan made his way to the depot, questioning Ed the postmaster, a thin man in horn-rimmed glasses and a permanently worried expression. Ed told Dylan no one had come or gone all night. No tracks, no signs of forced entry, just empty shelves and a gnawing sense of unease. Dylan promised to let Jack know if he found anything unusual. Back at the Turner house, Jack built up the fire, the flames painting golden shadows across the walls. He checked Evelyn's wounds, then sat nearby, lost in thought. He couldn't ignore Thor's strange devotion, nor Evelyn's haunted glances at the dog. Jack knew secrets when he saw them, and tonight, the blizzard was not the only thing obscuring the truth. Night fell, the wind howled, and somewhere beyond the darkened forest, someone, or something, moved with intent. Jack sat in the glow of the fire, listening to the quiet breaths of his son, the restless sighs of the dog, and the troubled sleep of the woman he had saved, knowing this was only the beginning. The storm had slackened to a mournful wind by dawn, blowing snow in gentle spirals across the frozen yard. Inside the Turner cabin, the world was lit by the pale gold of morning and the crackling glow of the fire. Evelyn Brooks slept uneasily on the couch, her brow furrowed, lips moving with the restless rhythm of a dream. When she woke, it was with a jolt, her green eyes wide and clouded with fear. Her hand went first to her wounded arm, then to her chest, as if she needed to be sure she was still alive. She looked around and saw Thor lying beside the couch, massive head on his paws, amber eyes watching her with an intensity that made her heart race. For a moment, Evelyn forgot where she was. The world pressed in with the strange hush of unfamiliar safety, a stranger's home, a fire burning, a boy's laughter echoing faintly from the kitchen. But Thor's presence was like a lightning strike from the past. She tried to sit up but winced at the ache in her arm. Her gaze fixed on the dog, fear giving way to something raw, grief, recognition, guilt. Thor whined, ears flicking forward. Jack entered, a mug of coffee in one hand, his worn features drawn in the morning light. He paused when he saw Evelyn's expression, and for a moment said nothing, letting the quiet work between them. "You know him," Jack said softly, handing her the mug. Evelyn's fingers trembled as she took it. "He's Thor." She sounded as if the word hurt. "But when I knew him, his name was Bear." Jack raised an eyebrow, settling on the edge of the old armchair. "Bear?" "That was his K-9 name. I was his handler in Denver," she whispered, looking away. 2 years ago. He was the best partner I ever had." Thor rose and pressed his nose against her palm, whining, his body shivering with old emotion. Evelyn's face twisted with a sadness so sharp Jack felt it in his own chest. "What happened?" he asked. She drew a breath that sounded like a confession. "There was a raid. My partner, Officer Kimball, went in first. Bear Thor saved my life, but Kimball didn't make it. Afterward, Bear changed. He was jumpy, wouldn't take commands, wouldn't trust anyone. They said he was unfit for service. They took him away. I fought it, but I lost." Evelyn brushed a tear from her cheek, her hands clutching the blanket. "I thought I'd never see him again. Then I transferred out here, started over. When I woke up last night and saw him, I thought I was still dreaming, or dead." Thor licked her hand, and Evelyn managed a shaky smile. "He remembered me, didn't he?" Jack nodded. "He's never acted like this with anyone. Not even with me. Not really." Jack's voice was low, understanding now the unspoken bond between woman and dog. A bond forged by fear, broken by violence, and now tentatively mending in the soft hush of a Wyoming morning. Lucas hovered in the doorway, clutching a folded piece of paper. He was still in his pajamas, hair sticking up wildly, but his eyes were serious. "Dad?" Jack beckoned him over. "What's up, champ?" "I went outside to feed the chickens. There are tracks in the snow by the back door boots, I think. And this was stuck in the fence." Lucas handed over a scrap of lined notebook paper, the words scrawled in blocky, uneven print. "Sheriff Turner, back off or someone else gets hurt." Jack's jaw tightened. He looked at Evelyn, whose face drained of color as she read the note. "We need to call Dylan," Jack said, trying to keep his voice steady for Lucas's sake, "and lock all the doors." Thor's hackles lifted as if he too could read the warning. Jack ruffled Lucas's hair. "You did good, son. Go keep an eye on the radio for me." Lucas nodded, trying to be brave, though his hands shook. Jack watched him go, pride and fear mingling in his chest. Evelyn drew a shaky breath. Someone followed me. Maybe from the depot last night or from Denver. Her voice trembled with old fear. I'm sorry, Jack. I never meant to bring trouble to your door. Jack offered a tight smile. Trouble finds this family, with or without invitations. But you're safe here. In the kitchen, Lucas scanned the police radio for updates, determined to help. Thor stayed with Evelyn, who stroked his fur as if grounding herself in the feel of a lost friend. The day passed in anxious routines, Jack checking windows, calling Dylan for advice, keeping his voice low and reassuring. Dylan promised to come by later, shotgun in hand if need be. Dylan himself was a mountain of a man, thick-bodied with a big gray beard, blue eyes always crinkled with laughter, but now rimmed with concern. He'd grown up in Pine Lake, knew everyone's secrets, and always stood up for those who needed it most. By noon, the snow had stopped, but the sky remained gray, pressing close over the pines. Jack sat at the kitchen table, piecing together the fragments of Evelyn's story. The lost medical supplies, the threat at his door, the unlikely reunion of woman and dog. Each detail pointed to something larger, a shadow stretching from the city into their quiet town. Lucas sat nearby, tracing the outline of the boot prints in his notebook, Thor's big head resting on his lap. He's not just a dog, is he? Lucas whispered. Evelyn smiled, a soft sadness in her eyes. He never was. He's a hero, even if he's been broken. Jack glanced out the frosted window, heart heavy with worry, but steadied by the stubborn warmth of his family and the strange, fierce love of a dog who had already survived more than most. The day waned, the fire burned low. In the gentle hush of dusk, it seemed, for a moment, that hope might survive another night. Darkness settled over Pine Lake with a density that pressed against the cabin windows, swallowing up the world beyond the circle of the porch light. Jack Turner double-checked the deadbolts and peered out at the sweeping yard, boots crunching in the packed snow. He stood tall in the cold, his frame backlit by the golden glow inside, jaw set with determination. In his gloved hand, he carried a flashlight and his old .38 revolver, belt cinched over his sheriff's coat. Next to him was Dylan Ward, bundled in his patched green parka, a battered Remington slung across one broad shoulder. Dylan's eyes, blue and quick, missed nothing even as snow gusted in the wind. He was a solid presence, reliable, tough, with a low, steady voice that calmed the jitteriest nerves in Pine Lake. They spoke little, trudging toward the storage sheds beyond the tree line, boots leaving deep prints in the moonlit snow. If someone's been lurking around, we'll find them, Dylan said. His beard was rimed with frost, but his eyes sparkled with a kind of wild excitement that came from facing trouble, not running from it. Let's check the depot first, then circle back. Jack nodded, every sense alert, glancing back toward the cabin where his family waited. Inside, the hush was nearly total. Lucas, after a long, nervous evening tracing boot prints on his notepad and peeking through the curtains, had finally settled on the living room floor, organizing his father's collection of old sheriff's patches and reading aloud to Thor and Evelyn. The fire popped in the grate, casting restless shadows across the walls. Evelyn sat curled in a faded armchair, a blanket draped around her shoulders, the lines of exhaustion softening her angular face. The gash on her forehead was healing, but bruises still colored her cheek. She held a mug of tea between both hands, watching Lucas with the wary affection of someone unused to gentle domesticity. Thor sat at her feet, chin on paws, massive tail flicking occasionally as he listened to the boy's voice. For the first time in days, Evelyn felt almost safe. Suddenly Thor's ears shot up, his head lifted, nostrils flaring, amber eyes fixing on the kitchen door. A deep rumble started in his chest. Evelyn straightened, setting the mug aside, and Lucas fell silent. There was a muffled sound, a soft thud, then a creak, as if someone had stepped onto the back porch. Evelyn's heart pounded. She slipped silently to her feet and reached for the phone, but found the line dead, the dial tone replaced by a flat hum. Thor rose, fur bristling, body tense. The dog's stance was different now, alert, professional, as if the years of training had never left him. Evelyn motioned for Lucas to hide. The boy, wide-eyed but obedient, crawled under the dining table, clutching his father's flashlight. A window pane rattled. Shadows moved just beyond the glass. Evelyn crouched behind the sofa, searching for anything she could use as a weapon. Thor stalked forward, lips curled, a low growl simmering in his throat. The kitchen door burst inward with a crash. Two men entered, one tall and wiry in a dark ski jacket, the other heavy-set with a rough beard and a wool cap pulled low. Both wore black gloves and boots, faces half-shadowed, eyes darting as they swept the room. The taller man carried a short-barreled shotgun, the other wielded a crowbar. They moved quickly but not quietly, as if accustomed to scaring people more than hiding from them. Evelyn recognized the glint of violence in their eyes. For a moment she was back in Denver, the night everything fell apart, except now. She was unarmed, outnumbered, and alone with a child to protect. But Thor was a wall between her and the intruders. The big dog stepped forward, growling, teeth bared, tail straight as a rod. The heavy-set man hesitated. "That's the damn dog I heard about," he muttered. "He'll bite, you know," the tall man sneered. "Shoot it then." But before he could raise the gun, Thor lunged. He moved with explosive power, launching himself at the man with the shotgun, knocking him sideways so that the weapon discharged harmlessly into the floor. Evelyn seized the moment, grabbing a heavy iron poker from beside the fireplace. Lucas, shaking under the table, clamped a hand over his mouth, watching the chaos unfold. The second intruder swung his crowbar, but Thor turned, jaws snapping, driving the man back against the wall. The tall man scrambled to his feet, aiming his gun, but Evelyn hurled the poker at his arm, sending the weapon clattering away. The dog was relentless, herding the men back with snapping teeth and thunderous barks. The intruders stumbled over each other, cursing, slamming into the furniture as Thor forced them toward the kitchen. "We just want the girl," the heavy-set man shouted. "She brought this on herself," but Evelyn didn't flinch. She moved with the certainty of someone who had decided to stop running. "Get out," she ordered, voice hard as flint. "If you come any closer, you'll wish you hadn't." The men, beaten and panicked, slammed out the kitchen door, vanishing into the night. Thor stood in the doorway, barking until their footsteps faded into the distance. Then, panting, he returned to Evelyn's side, pressing against her legs. Evelyn dropped to her knees, arms flung around the dog's thick neck, shaking with adrenaline and relief. Lucas crawled out from under the table, flashlight in one hand, face pale but determined. "Are you okay, Miss Evelyn?" he whispered. "I am now," she said, managing a shaky smile. "Thanks to you and Thor." The three sat in the circle of firelight, the danger past but the echo of violence lingering. In the aftermath, Lucas moved toward the overturned pantry, searching for a missing flashlight battery. As he dug through spilled bags of flour and fallen tins, he heard a faint whimper. Startled, he pushed aside a canvas shopping tote and discovered a tiny dog, no more than a few months old, with patchy gray and white fur and scared, luminous brown eyes. The puppy was shivering, tangled in a towel, its small body damp and cold. Lucas scooped the puppy up, wrapping it in his own jacket. The animal licked his fingers, tail trembling, but made no sound. "He must have been left here," Lucas said, voice hushed. "Maybe by the men who broke in." Evelyn knelt beside him, inspecting the puppy's ribs and paws with gentle hands. "Poor thing," she murmured. "He's half-starved." Thor sniffed the new arrival, giving a soft, approving woof. As the adrenaline faded, the strange little family gathered in the warmest corner of the house, Evelyn and Lucas tending the puppy, Thor curled protectively nearby, the fire casting gold across all their faces. For the first time since coming to Pine Lake, Evelyn felt something like hope. Outside, Jack and Dylan finished their rounds at the storage shed, finding no sign of the intruders, but noting scuffed footprints leading back toward the Turner house. They returned home to find the living room a tableau of chaos and courage-broken furniture, spilled tea, a rescued puppy sleeping in Lucas's arms, and Evelyn sitting quietly by the fire, with Thor's head in her lap. Jack's eyes softened at the sight, and even Dylan, gruff as ever, grinned at the scene. "Looks like you had an adventure of your own," Dylan said, voice wry. Jack knelt to hug Lucas and check the locks, silently thankful for the dog, for the boy, for the battered but unbroken circle of family gathered in the old cabin. Night thickened around them, but inside a fierce, hard-won warmth kept the shadows at bay. The morning after the break-in dawned heavy and gray, as if even the sky grieved the toll of another violent night. Jack Turner rose early, his steps weary but measured, moving through the battered cabin with the quiet dignity of a man who'd carried loss before. The chaos of the previous evening lingered, shattered mugs, a toppled chair, the faint scent of gunpowder and fear, but within it was a new undercurrent of resolve. Jack set a pot of coffee to percolate and watched through the frosted window as the world outside held its breath, trees dusted with white, the shed's roof glittering with icicles. In the kitchen, Lucas sat at the table, small arms wrapped protectively around the puppy he'd rescued, the creature's patchy gray and white fur contrasting with the boy's wild sandy hair. Lucas's face was pale with exhaustion, eyes swollen from crying after last night's terror, but his jaw was set with the stubborn determination Jack recognized as his own. Lucas was stroking the puppy's head, whispering words of comfort. "You're safe now, little guy. I'll take care of you," while Dylan Ward leaned against the counter nearby, grizzled and patient, brewing tea in an ancient enamel kettle. Dylan's frame filled the small kitchen. He was as steady as ever, his battered green parka slung over a chair, a new bandage peeking out from beneath his sleeve, where he'd scraped his arm helping Jack reinforce the door. "He'll be all right," Dylan said, nodding at the puppy. "Bit of rest, some warm milk, and he'll be up terrorizing squirrels by tomorrow." He winked at Lucas, who managed a tired smile. "Thank you, Uncle Dylan." Dylan's features softened. He'd never married, never had children of his own, but he'd taken to Lucas like kin. Dylan was the kind of man who hid his gentleness beneath a layer of jokes and gruff common sense. But now, seeing the puppy's ribs and trembling paws, he was all compassion. "You want me to watch him today, sport?" Lucas nodded, voice catching. "Just while I help Dad." The puppy yawned and nestled deeper into Lucas's lap, a flicker of hope on a cold morning. In the living room, the air was tense with unspoken words. Evelyn sat near the hearth, her blonde hair pulled back in a loose braid, cheeks still bruised but color returning. She looked older than her 34 years, the weight of memory and responsibility etched into the lines at the corners of her mouth. Thor sat beside her, resting his heavy head on her knee, amber eyes watching her every move with unwavering focus. All morning, Thor had shadowed her, refusing to eat or drink until she coaxed him, leaning into her touch with a devotion that bordered on desperate. Jack watched them, arms folded, eyes unreadable. He understood what was happening, saw the way Thor's tail thumped with a joy the dog had rarely shown in all his months at the Turner home. Evelyn met Jack's gaze across the flickering fire. Her voice, when it came, was low but steady. "He remembers everything, Jack. The training, the work, the nights on patrol, even the bad things. Last night, when those men broke in, he wasn't just any dog. He was Bear again. He knew exactly what to do. He saved me." Her hand found Thor's scarred ear, stroking gently. And after, when it was quiet, he was calm. For the first time since Denver, he slept through the night. She blinked rapidly, a single tear escaping down her cheek. "I think he needs to come back with me. He was mine, and I lost him. Maybe we both get a second chance." Jack's throat tightened, but he nodded, forcing a smile. "He's always been your dog, Ev. I just borrowed him for a while." Jack crouched by Thor, scratching behind the dog's ear. "You've got work to do, big guy. Just promise you'll look after each other." Thor licked Jack's hand, a low whine in his throat, then pressed against Evelyn as if to say yes. Lucas stood in the doorway, puppy clutched in his arms, watching the scene with wide, uncertain eyes. He bit his lip, holding back tears, but Evelyn opened her arms and beckoned him close. "You saved me too, Lucas." "I'll never forget it." Lucas hugged her fiercely, then knelt to hug Thor, burying his face in the dog's thick fur. "Will I see you again?" he whispered. Evelyn smiled, voice trembling. "I promise. And I'll send you pictures." "Bear Thor loves having his picture taken." Dylan stepped in, clearing his throat. "If you need help with that little one," he said, nodding to the puppy, "I've got room at my place. Been a while since I had someone snoring louder than me." Lucas smiled through his tears, nodding. Jack placed a hand on his son's shoulder, grateful for the circle of support that had formed around them, battered but unbroken. Evelyn packed a few of her things, her badge, a faded photo from her police days, and the battered collar with Bear's name still etched in metal. She and Thor stepped onto the porch, Jack and Lucas standing side by side, watching as the pair disappeared down the snowy path. Thor paused once, looking back, eyes shining with gratitude and promise, before trotting to catch up with Evelyn. Inside, the house felt emptier, but there was a new kind of peace. Dylan scooped the puppy from Lucas's arms. "What's his name, champ?" Lucas thought for a moment. "How about Lucky?" "Because he's lucky he found us." Dylan grinned. Lucky it is. The puppy barked once, a small, hopeful sound, and wriggled in Dylan's arms, already at home. The day moved quietly, chores done with heavy hearts and lighter steps. Jack stoked the fire, Lucas swept the porch, and Lucky tumbled clumsily after Dylan, determined to explore every inch of his new world. Jack paused at the window, watching the gray sky lighten to pale blue. He missed Thor's steady presence, the reassurance of a warm body at his side, but he knew the right thing had been done. In letting go, he had given both dog and woman a second chance at the lives they were meant to have. That night, for the first time in a long time, Jack slept soundly, dreams filled with the memory of a dog's bark echoing through the pines, and the laughter of a boy calling a new name in the morning snow. The wind picked up before dawn, rattling the eaves and driving icy sleet against the windows of the Turner house. Pine Lake braced for another squall, the sky bruised purple and heavy, as if the world itself were holding its breath. Jack Turner woke early, nerves buzzing with an old anticipation he hadn't felt since his days as a rookie cop in Cheyenne. He dressed in layers-thick sweater, sheriff's coat, worn boots, gloves stiff with cold, and loaded his revolver, every motion careful and practiced. Lucas was already awake, hair wild and cheeks pink with excitement and worry. The boy had refused to sleep in his own room since Thor left, curling up instead in the living room, Lucky tucked at his side. Lucky, the puppy, was now energetic and sturdier, with a glossy coat and keen brown eyes that never left Lucas. Dylan arrived just as the first flakes of snow began to fall, stamping his boots at the door and brushing frost from his thick beard. He looked rougher than usual, his face lined with concern, but his manner was brisk. "I checked the roads, some fresh tire tracks by the depot, 2 sets of footprints going to the back loading bay," he reported, his blue eyes sharp under the battered brim of his hat. "It doesn't look right. The supplies aren't in the main storeroom. I think they're planning to move them out, maybe before the storm hits full force." Jack nodded grimly. "We don't have much time." While Dylan and Jack conferred, Lucas played with Lucky on the kitchen floor, tossing a squeaky ball made from old socks. Lucky's small tail wagged in furious delight, but he kept glancing at the adults, sensing the tension. Jack squatted down and looked Lucas in the eye. "We need your help today, son. This is about the missing medical supplies, the ones meant for the school and clinic. You and Lucky are our lookouts. Think you can handle that?" Lucas straightened, a spark of pride lighting his face. "Yes, sir," Lucky barked as if in agreement. Outside, snow began to fall in earnest, draping the town in shifting veils of white. Jack, Dylan, and Lucas bundled up and moved quietly down the side street toward the depot, careful to avoid the main road. Dylan led, shoulders hunched and shotgun slung across his back, boots leaving deep impressions in the new snow. The depot itself was an aging brick building, windows frosted over, the loading dock sagging under years of use. Behind the building, a battered Ford pickup idled, its tailgate open, 2 burly men hauling crates and duffel bags into the truck bed. Jack recognized one of them, Red Matthews, a local with a short fuse and a longer criminal record, thick-necked and barrel-chested, hair cut close to the scalp. The other, unfamiliar, was tall and stoop-shouldered, with a hooked nose and sunken eyes, his movements furtive, glancing constantly over his shoulder. Dylan gestured for Jack and Lucas to duck behind a stack of empty pallets. They huddled close, breath fogging the air. "There's more," Dylan whispered, pointing at the alley another figure, a woman this time, slim and nervous, bundled in a dark puffer jacket. She stood lookout, arms crossed, eyes scanning the street. Her face was sharp, skin pale and freckled, hair a riot of red curls escaping her knit cap. She chewed her lower lip, glancing at her watch. Jack made a mental note. This was Sarah Dorsey, a former nurse who'd lost her job at the clinic the year before. She was clever and usually kind, but desperation had a way of changing people. Jack's radio crackled, just once, a faint squelch, before Evelyn's calm voice broke through the static. She was patching in from the highway with Thor beside her. "Jack, I'm close to the turnoff. The state police are 20 minutes out. You're not alone." Her words steadied him. "Copy, Ev. We'll hold position. Watch for my signal." Thor barked, deep and steady, and Lucas smiled at the sound, relief in his eyes. Suddenly Red shouted, "Hurry it up! Storm's getting worse!" The strangers loaded the last of the boxes, then ducked into the truck. Sarah glanced once down the alley right at Lucas and Lucky's hiding spot. She frowned, suspicion flaring, and took a step forward. Lucas, heart hammering, did exactly what Jack had taught him. He He gave Lucky a signal 2 sharp claps, and the puppy darted from behind the pallets, yipping and zigzagging across the snowy lot. Sarah's attention snapped to the dog. She followed, calling, "Here, little one!" Her voice, despite the situation, was gentle. Sarah had always loved animals. Jack seized the moment. He signaled to Dylan, who stepped out, shotgun ready but not raised. "It's over, Red," Jack called. "Sheriff's office, drop the boxes and step away from the truck." The criminals froze. Red cursed, reaching for something under his coat, but Thor's bark echoed through Jack's earpiece, followed by Evelyn's shout, "Drop it now!" Thor's silhouette appeared at the edge of the lot, Evelyn behind him, weapon drawn but hands steady. The tension broke. Sarah, stunned, put her hands up. The tall man slumped against the cab, defeated. Red looked from Jack to Evelyn to Dylan, weighed his options, and dropped the box he was holding, shoulders sagging. Lucas sprinted to Lucky, scooping the puppy into his arms. The state police sirens wailed in the distance, growing louder. Dylan kept his shotgun trained, voice level. "Don't be stupid, Red." Not today. In the storm's hush, every sound was magnified. The crunch of boots, the nervous whimper of Lucky, the steady click of Evelyn's radio as she called in backup. The wind howled, snow swirling, but the ring of law and loyalty held. Within minutes, police cruisers arrived, officers piling out to secure the scene. Red, the tall stranger, and Sarah were handcuffed and led away, their faces sullen and resigned. Jack knelt by Lucas, ruffling his hair. "You did good, son. You and Lucky both." Lucas's cheeks glowed with pride as he hugged the puppy. Evelyn approached, face flushed with cold, eyes bright. She crouched to meet Lucas eye to eye, Thor pressed close against her leg. "You were brave. You helped stop them." Thor nuzzled Lucky, approving, before turning his amber gaze on Jack and Evelyn, a final look, full of meaning, as if to say farewell. Dylan clapped Jack on the back, grinning. "Not bad for a blizzard morning, eh?" Jack's laughter was shaky, but genuine. As the police cars rolled away and the storm began to ease, Jack, Lucas, Dylan, Evelyn, Thor, and Lucky stood in a small huddle beside the depot. Thor's head rested in Evelyn's hands, both dog and woman steady at last. For a long, silent moment, there was nothing but relief and a fierce sense of family, chosen and built anew through danger, hope, and the courage of a boy and his dog. The storm had passed. Pale gold sunlight spilled through frost-laced windows, painting the cabin walls in soft, hopeful colors. Pine Lake, beneath its quilt of new snow, stirred awake. Smoke rose from chimneys. Children's laughter echoed faintly, and the bitter edge of the long winter night began to recede. For the first time in weeks, Jack Turner woke to silence not filled with fear, but with a gentle sense of peace. The bruises of the past days, both on his body and his heart, remained, but as he stood at the kitchen window sipping strong coffee, Jack felt something unfamiliar begin to thaw inside him. In the living room, Lucas was sprawled on the rug in a pool of sunlight, Lucky curled contentedly in his arms. The puppy's once bony frame had grown plumper, his fur now silky and bright. Lucas spoke softly to the dog, teaching him tricks and offering pieces of leftover toast. There was a new lightness in the boy's face, the shadows from Thor's absence slowly replaced by the joy of caring for his own companion. Dylan arrived just after sunrise, knocking the snow from his boots and bringing with him a quiet, fatherly energy. He wore his usual patched parka and a smile that creased the corners of his blue eyes. In his arms was another small pup, a brown and white bundle with wide, trusting eyes and a constantly wagging tail. This puppy, which Lucas had found shivering outside the depot days before, had spent the week in Dylan's care and now seemed to think the older man was its entire world. "He needs a name," Dylan said, settling on the couch beside Lucas. "Been calling him Scout, but if you've got a better idea, I'm open." Lucas giggled, Lucky yipping in agreement, and the two puppies instantly began to wrestle, tumbling over each other in a flurry of paws and delighted growls. Dylan watched, face soft, and Jack felt a wave of gratitude for his old friend, a man whose loneliness had always been disguised by cheerful gruffness, now transformed by the company of a tiny, eager dog. The aftermath of the storm had brought closure to Pine Lake. The stolen medical supplies were safely returned to the clinic and school. The townsfolk gathered to thank Jack, Dylan, and especially Lucas, whose quick thinking had saved more than one life. Red Matthews and the others were in county lockup, awaiting trial. and Sarah Dorsey, tearful and repentant, had confessed her part, begging forgiveness and vowing to make amends. Jack visited her at the jail, finding her thinner and quieter, hair pulled back and eyes rimmed with regret. She thanked him for speaking kindly on her behalf to the judge and admitted, "Desperation makes you forget who you are sometimes." "I'm sorry," Sheriff Jack nodded, knowing the town would find a way to forgive, as Pine Lake always did. As the week drew on, the house filled with preparations for goodbye. Evelyn, standing by the fireplace with a packed duffel at her feet, looked healthier than she had in months. Her face had regained color, her eyes bright beneath her blonde fringe. There was a sadness in her smile, but also a quiet pride. She wore her old Denver badge pinned inside her coat, a symbol of scars that no longer ached quite so sharply. "Got the call from Cheyenne this morning," she said to Jack as they sat together over one last cup of coffee. "There's an opening for a field instructor training new K-9 teams. It's a good fit. I think Thor and I are ready." At her feet, Thor stretched and yawned, his thick black and tan fur gleaming. The old dog looked younger than he had all winter. He moved with new purpose, tail wagging as Lucas knelt to hug him, tears shining in the boy's eyes. "Will you come back to visit?" Lucas asked, voice small but hopeful. Evelyn ruffled his hair, her own voice tight with feeling. "You'll see us. I promise. And you have Lucky and Scout to keep you busy now." Thor nuzzled Lucas, then licked the puppy's head in farewell. The parting was bittersweet. Jack stood with Evelyn on the porch, watching her load her things into the truck. The dawn air was crisp, sun glinting off the snow-laden pines. Jack wanted to say more, but instead he offered what mattered most, a firm handshake, a rare smile, and the truth. "You saved all of us, Ev." "Thank you." She squeezed his hand in return. "You gave me my partner back. Take care of Lucas, and take care of yourself." Thor jumped into the passenger seat, ready for new roads. As the truck pulled away, Lucas and the two puppies ran alongside, waving wildly until the taillights vanished among the trees. Inside, a different rhythm settled over the Turner home. The echo of Thor's bark lingered, replaced by Lucky's eager yelps and Scout's playful growls. Lucas spent his days teaching the puppies tricks, inventing obstacle courses in the snowy yard, and telling stories to Dylan about all the adventures yet to come. Dylan, now a regular presence, shared meals, fixed broken steps, and laughed more than he had in years. At night, Jack found himself sitting by the fire, the two puppies curled at his feet, and Lucas reading nearby, warmth blooming in the quiet like dawn over snow. On Saturday, the whole town gathered at the community center to celebrate the return of the medical supplies. The air inside was thick with the smell of cinnamon rolls and strong coffee, the sound of laughter, and the happy chaos of children and dogs running between tables. Lucas and Dylan entered with Lucky and Scout trotting proudly at their heels, both puppies now local celebrities. Sarah Dorsey, released on bail, joined them, hair neat, posture shy, but greeted with kind smiles and hugs. The townspeople forgave her in the way only a small community can, gently, openly, allowing her a chance to begin again. That evening, as the sun set in a blaze of gold and lavender behind the pines, Jack stood on his porch with Lucas at his side, two puppies tussling in the snow below. The air was cold, but it no longer felt empty. The memories of fear and loss still lived in the shadows, but hope had returned with the dawn. Jack breathed deeply, his heart lighter, and for the first time in a long while, he looked toward the future, not as something to endure, but as something to cherish. Family, he thought, wasn't always what you expected. Sometimes it came on four paws, or in the shape of a neighbor's kindness, or the courage to forgive and start anew. As night fell, Jack called the puppies in and closed the door behind him, safe in the knowledge that no matter what storms might come, love and loyalty would always light the way home. The year's final days arrived quietly, blanketing Pine Lake in gentle snow and the golden hush of winter afternoons. The storm's chaos was now only a distant memory, replaced by the calm routines of small-town life. The old pines glistened beneath a blue sky, and sunlight flashed off icicles hanging from every porch, the world outside shining with the hope of a new year. Jack Turner awoke on New Year's morning to the sound of laughter, real, unburdened laughter, the kind he hadn't heard in his home for a long time. Lucas and Lucky tumbled together on the living room rug, the puppy's floppy ears flapping as he leapt from couch to floor and back, barking in delight. Scout Dylan's brown and white puppy joined the fun, their play filling the house with a joyful clatter. The walls that once echoed with sorrow now rang with the noise of family. Jack stood in the doorway, arms folded, watching with a contented smile. He looked older than his 42 years, gray at the temples, lines deepened by worry and the Wyoming wind, but his eyes were softer now, creased by laughter, not just pain. Lucas had grown in ways only hardship can shape. He was still a boy, but now steadier, more thoughtful, often helping without being asked, quick to comfort anyone, especially his father or a frightened dog. The town had noticed the change. Mrs. Parker, a brisk, silver-haired widow and longtime neighbor, had remarked just yesterday, "That boy of yours, he's got more heart than most men twice his age." Jack's pride had shone brighter than the kitchen's morning sun. Breakfast was a lively affair. Dylan arrived with Scout before sunrise, stomping snow from his boots, cheeks ruddy and beard sparkling with frost. He brought homemade cinnamon rolls, cradled in a blue-checked towel, and a handful of dog treats wrapped in wax paper. Dylan looked rough and ready as always, stocky, a bit bow-legged, his thick gray hair unruly and eyes twinkling beneath bushy brows. Yet there was a new piece in him, too. Dylan was never short on jokes or warmth, but now, with Scout curled at his feet and Lucas grinning beside him, he seemed to fit into the Turner home like a missing puzzle piece finally found. Sarah Dorsey stopped by mid-morning, carrying a stack of donated blankets from the women's club. She wore a bright red scarf, her riot of curls pinned up, and though she moved with a careful shyness, her eyes were hopeful, her posture straighter than before. The town had rallied around her in her efforts to rebuild. She'd found work assisting the church's outreach program, and the children adored her for her gentle ways and the pocketful of peppermints she always seemed to have. She and Lucas chatted as equals now, sharing quiet moments while feeding Lucky or helping Mrs. Parker at the animal shelter. After breakfast, the little group headed into town for the New Year's volunteer drive. The air was crisp and clean, their boots crunching along Main Street's snowy sidewalks as pine boughs dipped overhead. The Pine Lake Volunteer Rescue Team was meeting in the town hall's old gymnasium, now filled with tables of food donations, piles of warm clothing, and the bustle of townsfolk eager to help. Lucas, wearing his new red parka, a Christmas gift from Jack, walked beside Dylan, Lucky trotting at his heel. Scout darted between them, tail wagging, ears perked for every sound. Jack watched his son and felt a fierce, quiet pride. He remembered the boy's terror and courage in those dark days of the storm, how Lucas had found hope in the smallest of lives, a shivering puppy, and brought warmth back to a broken home. Today, Lucas was welcomed as one of the youngest and most enthusiastic volunteers. He took charge of collecting canned food with Dylan, their teamwork a model for the others. Lucky and Scout became unofficial mascots, their playful energy bringing smiles even to the oldest volunteers. At one table, Mrs. Parker, her sharp eyes softened by age and kindness, showed Lucas how to fold blankets and make care kits for families in need. At another, Sarah organized donations, her hands deft and sure, her smile never far from her lips. Later, back at the cabin, Jack and Dylan watched the boys play outside, snowballs flying, puppies bounding after them in endless circles. The afternoon light slipped through the trees, gold on white, and the sound of their laughter drifted across the yard. The phone rang, and Jack answered, his heart lifting as he heard Evelyn's voice on the line. She sounded strong and happy, her words bright with news from Cheyenne. Thor barked in the background, deep, cheerful, unmistakably himself. "Thor loves his new job," Evelyn said, "and so do I. But we miss you all. Lucas, you'd be proud. He's already teaching the other dogs how to behave." Lucas beamed, pressing close to the phone, Lucky and Scout pressing in for their share of the conversation. "Tell him we love him," Lucas shouted. Evelyn's laughter rang out clear, bridging the miles between them. That night, as twilight fell, the Turner house glowed with warmth. Dylan stayed for supper, sharing stories with Jack while the boys played at their feet. Later, Sarah and Mrs. Parker dropped by, bringing dessert and sharing stories of their own. The kitchen was full of voices and light, the air scented with cinnamon and wood smoke. Jack caught himself smiling more often, feeling a sense of belonging that had long eluded him. As the clock struck midnight, they gathered by the fire, raising mugs of hot cider to a new year. Lucas, curled up with Lucky in his lap and Scout at his feet, felt something new and unbreakable inside him. gratitude for family, for friendship, and for the chance to begin again. He understood, in a way he couldn't quite explain, what it meant to be brave, not just in the face of danger, but in the quiet work of caring for others, of letting go and reaching out, of forgiving and moving forward. Jack watched his son and knew that no matter what storms might come, this was home built not by walls, but by love. In the quiet heart of Pine Lake, after every storm and every loss, what remained was not just survival but the miracle of hope, kindness, and second chances. Sometimes, a miracle is not thunder or fire from the heavens, but a friend who shows up at your door, a child's courage, a rescued dog, or the warmth of a family coming together again. Maybe it's not the size of the miracle that matters, but the love we share and the faith that God is always working in the small details. Perhaps you, watching this story, have lived through your own winters. Maybe you are waiting for a sign that things can get better, that love will return, that a new beginning is possible. Remember, even when the world feels cold, even when the night seems endless, God is still with us, guiding us, sending little miracles, and making a way through. If this story touched your heart, if you believe in the power of second chances, please share it with someone who needs hope. Leave a comment below and tell us where you're watching from. If you believe that God still works miracles, write Amen in the comments, and don't forget to subscribe for more stories of hope and courage. May God bless you and your loved ones this season and always.